Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. You are here listening to our NFL draft betting update. We are 2 weeks away from the 2023 NFL draft. Our usual crew, Brendan Glasheen, your host, with Luke Swain, Travis Reed, our guests and analysts. We join you every week, midweek, leading up to NFL draft day. Round one starts 2 weeks from tomorrow, April 27th. We've also got some new fun nuggets we're going to introduce to the program. If you've been joining us since the beginning for these draft betting updates, our director of research, Evan Abrams, will be chiming in throughout the course of today's podcast. We're also joined today by a very special guest, James Weaver, who joins us from the well-respected sports data and analytics company, Sports Info Solutions. James, thanks for stopping by the podcast. Interested to get another voice on here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're all about?
Yeah, for sure, Brendan. Thanks for having me on today. I am a football research and development associate over at Sports Info Solutions, where you can find me doing things like writing articles on our website at sis.com. Also do things behind the scenes like building out tools for our various clients and things like that nature as well. I've also put in a lot of time and effort into our SIS NFL draft site. So that'll be a lot of the talking points today. So get that a look out.
All right, I've got the Sports Info Solutions big board up. We'll get to that because I think Luke and Travis have thoughts. But as we normally do when we introduce the program, this is our second straight week getting together. We weren't together during the heat of March Madness. But the biggest storyline, Luke Swain, is the line movement on the number one pick in the draft. Bryce Young is now minus 300 at FanDuel to be the number one pick in the draft. CJ Stroud has slipped to plus 220. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so it was I mean, everything you're hearing is it is Bryce, and there's nothing confirmed, and it's starting to feel somewhat of a narrative that is getting recycled by different outlets that are picking it up as their own and putting it out there, where we've been harping Stroud at 650, where it shows you how sensitive this market is, because you can get Stroud at plus 650. The trade happens, it goes to minus 200, and you feel really good about your bet, and you're almost counting your money. And then all of a sudden, a couple of rumors start to leak, and all of a sudden, that winner that you once thought not too long ago is starting to lose a lot of faith. But there are a lot of we truly just don't know. Like if I'm making a mock draft right now, I am putting Bryce at number one. But at the same time, Stroud still has his meeting at Carolina next week, which to me definitely does matter, because from what you're hearing is Bryce's meetings with the Panthers are what have kind of shifted this. The odds where you hear Tepper loves Bryce and Reich, quote unquote, likes Stroud. So the real rumors are what is like the juicy rumors is what's going on with the number two pick at this time, assuming Bryce goes number one.
Travis, since we last met, this has completely flipped. Stroud is now the second favorite to go number one. Bryce Young is the favorite. Your reaction to this flip since we last spoke?
Yeah, it was kind of a nuts scenario there where Chris Mortensen had the report where, it's definitely going to be Bryce. And then he walked that back saying, that was just for a TV show. That wasn't an actual report. And now we're kind of going back. Well, now him and Schefter both do think it's going to be Bryce Young. I'm with Luke. I think this is still kind of a toss-up. I think while this news was coming out, if you could still get Bryce at plus money, go for it. But if you ask me to make a bet right now, I'll take Stroud at plus money. But if you make me mock it, I'm still going to take Bryce. But it's kind of one of those things. I'll take either one of these guys at plus money. I still think this is close to a toss-up, and nobody really knows. I would not be surprised if Carolina themselves is torn, and some members of the decision team want to take Bryce Young, some want to take Stroud, and they really won't make that decision until a couple of weeks.
And the one thing I do want to harp is, like, the argument for making a bet into the number one pick right now is basically the same exact argument that we've been saying, where Bryce is minus 300. He should not be minus 300. I would not lay Bryce at minus 300. Like, that's just wrong. Where it's the same thing where when Stroud was minus 300, he should never have been minus 300. And I do think if you still do believe Stroud is the number one pick, the valuable bet isn't actually taking Stroud at plus 220. It's taking Bryce at like plus 320 to go number 2, because if Stroud goes 1, Bryce might as well be minus infinity to go number 2, which you're getting plus 320 compared to plus 220 for basically the same bet.
So are you in a hedging situation yet, Luke, or is that too early to determine?
No, and I mean, I did hedge some liability that I had on Stroud, but that's the beauty of getting into this market as early as we have, January, February, where it's a lot easier to hedge out of a Stroud plus 650 ticket than it is a Stroud minus 200 or whatever it was. So I'm still hopeful, but yeah, like I said and Travis said, like, I would put Bryce at number 1 in terms of if I was making a mock.
James Weaver, you were shaking your head at Luke's thoughts on the market change to this. What are your thoughts from a sports info solutions perspective?
Yeah, I certainly agree that this is definitely still a toss-up. The plus 220 on Stroud, I would say at this point, if you don't have anything, it would be a valuable play. From a SIS perspective, we have them tied from their last year of production. They were tied in their total points rating per play. And our total points metric is like kind of an all-encompassing metric based on an EPA framework that assigns quantitative value to a player. Bryce kind of takes a little bit of the cake in terms of some of our other leaderboards, but Stroud was right there at second. Young is first in our SIS independent quarterback rating. Stroud was second. Bryce had higher IQR under pressure, and Stroud was third. In terms of some accuracy rankings, Young ranks higher in both catchable ball percentage and in on-target percentage. Stroud was a little bit further down the list, but in terms of production on a yards per play or adjusted net yards per play, Stroud was actually first and Young was fourth. So these two are just neck and neck. I would agree with the sentiment of Bryce would probably be number 1 on my mock draft or be the number 1 favorite. But at these prices, nothing's set. Like Luke had mentioned, Stroud hasn't even met with the Panthers yet. And that's certainly gonna, that could easily sway things one way in the market or not.
So we've got the betting market perspective, and then you've got to react. And this, of course, the movement can reflect news. Other times it doesn't, but there is news on Stroud. Lance Zierlein, who we've referenced often on our podcast, Zierlein from NFL.com. Luke, I think you said that mock that he put out last week, a week ago now, was a drunk mock where CJ Stroud could be selected by the Ravens if they move up. Then there's a report that CJ Stroud, this is Ian Rappaport, Stroud's going to meet with the Raiders, which last I thought when we first started doing this, the Raiders weren't interested anymore in moving up to go maybe get a Will Levis. Now they're connected to Stroud. They're going to meet with him. So as far as just the news coming from reputable draft people, and then you've got your Schefters and your Rappaports, ESPN, NFL Network, respectively, what do we make of just the news as of now? So Zierlein, he prefaced his mock 2 days prior to putting it out that it was going to be crazy. And it was going to cause chaos. Trunk. And when you read it, like that is your first inclination. And he is the person that we want to dial into when it comes to the Texans. His history, he's connected. He mocks the Texans picks every single year very accurately. Got them both last year. And when you're reading it, you think it's crazy. And then as we've progressed day by day since last week, it has become less and less crazy. Where at number 2 for the Texans, he had Tyree, which you see reports yesterday coming out that the Texans might pass on a quarterback because they like a guy like Tyree or Anderson. And then you see more reports that they have Levis above Stroud on their board. And then you look back at his mock and he has Levis at number 7 to the Texans trading up. So like at first glance, you're like, what the heck? And then as you see these reports coming out, it's like, holy shit. Like, was that like whole chaos preface that he said just to cover up to like him actually knowing maybe? But yeah, there are reports, like I think the strongest ones right now that are really creating a ripple effect to the market are the Texans passing on Stroud for maybe Levis, which I'd love to get James's thoughts on, like the S2 test in terms of, I think you just prefaced about like having a intelligence score, which I want to hear your thoughts on that. And then really if they go like Tyree or Anderson at 2, and something came out this morning about from, I think it was Pro Football Talk, that they aren't going to trade the number 2 pick and they are going to take a quarterback second.
But the context behind it very much had Levis vibes, where Demeco was saying that it's okay if he wasn't good in college, and he doesn't have to start day one, which it very much had Levis vibes, and subtly Richardson, but everything you're hearing backs up Levis.
Yeah, to kind of add on to that, Luke, in terms of the S2 test, that's certainly a newer quarterback intelligence test that has been surfacing around. From what I've seen, Bryce Young did score first in that test, and Levis did score high as well. And that kind of just, kind of breaks down your decision making and your just overall intelligence from processing information. And that kind of is reflected in his snap to throw time plus or minus percentage that we track as well at SIS. And he was second among among quarterback prospects there. So having that, and his accuracy isn't, you hear about the knock on his accuracy. He's still mid-tier, about fifth or tied for sixth in these prospects here, and on target percentage and catchable percentage, which isn't terrible. It's not as bad as Anthony Richardson, which we'll talk later, but yeah, I mean, there's certainly a case to be made that Levis could sneak in there at 3. He did have some strike. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say with Levis at Kentucky, you hear about Kentucky's struggles on the offensive line from what they had, their weapons as well, and their offensive philosophy with their offensive coordinator that left. So there was a lot of transition and a lot of overlying factors that Levis had to deal with at Kentucky in his final year. So yeah, traits are there. Some of the skills are there. So it wouldn't shock me to see him go up to 3 as well.
And Zerline does a great job, and hats off to him, because he is one of the few in terms of in the media to his stature that does this, but he replies to a ton of tweets. People ask him straight up about his opinion, and the replies don't show up on your timeline. So make sure you go to his profile and click into replies, because he responds to a ton of tweets, and there are a ton of great nuggets. And I want to say one of them yesterday, he basically said he didn't have any info, but he knows that the Texans value the S2 test a lot, which Levis scored, I think, second behind Bryce in terms of his S2 test, which would very much align as to why he had the Texans might have Levis ahead of Stroud.
Mm-hmm. One of his replies today, he mentions, he kind of buries the lead, but he said in my mock, he's referring to the mock where Stroud is being taken by Baltimore if they move up. But what I said in my mock, says Zerline, is being said by 2 or other 3 national people now. So
exactly.
His words getting out there. By the way, the report you referenced from Pro Football Talk, Miles Simmons, he buries the lead. They're talking about Case Keenum being coach on the field, but the first sentence, Texans are expected to use their number 2 overall pick in this year's draft on a quarterback. That wasn't the headline, though. The headline was Case Keenum, coach on the field.
Yeah, it was very, and it had a picture of Case Keenum too, and yeah.
Jeez, very
Case Keenum is not clickbait to me. I'm not clicking on an article because I'm seeing Case Keenum. Glad I did, but
well, and Keenum's actually fair to bring up because he was brought in to the Rams when they took Jared Goff first, so it's kind of a similar. They're connecting the dots as bringing in a young quarterback, rookie quarterback, have Case Keenum, I guess, is that whisperer they want. But again, you're right. Not clickbait, but you got to sift through and find it.
Yeah.
Travis Reed, as it pertains, and we'll move on. I'm sure we'll dabble back in quarterback talk, and it's all a domino effect in terms of how it affects the betting market. But just from a news perspective, when you look at mocks and news, so Rappaport, the meeting yesterday with Stroud and the Raiders was yesterday. And then the idea of Levis being considered higher, just from a news standpoint in the last 7 days, where are you at?
Well, I think this is kind of a tertiary thing that blends in, was Odell signing with the Ravens.
Yeah.
And then him and Lamar kind of partying together, being friends, which kind of implies that Lamar maybe is going back there, even though there's been nothing on the contract side that said that's the direction it's heading. But that does, like we mentioned, Baltimore trading up for one of these quarterbacks. Obviously, Lamar going back there's no reason to do that anymore. So I think that does take away one of the trade partner options. So that's one of the things in the news I think does make an impact. But again, that's all just hearsay. That's all just Instagram back and forthing between those two. But I think that is going to play into it. Whether or not Baltimore does get Lamar, does somebody else get Lamar? That's still a question mark that we're waiting. That'll eliminate one of these teams from the top 4 quarterbacks.
Speaking of Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, one of which may be the starter ahead of Case Keenum, wherever they end up. That will be the headline when the draft comes, I'm sure. Case Keenum's looking up to one of these two quarterbacks. Here are a couple notes from these two from Evan Abrams, Actions Director of Research. Beware of quarterbacks going 1 and 2 in the NFL draft because one of them is doomed. Since the 1970 NFL merger, QBs have gone 1-2 in the draft 8 times. Of the 16 total quarterbacks, half were flops. Only once have both met expectations. 50 years ago when Jim Plunkett and Archie Manning went 1-2 in 1971. Here are the other two 1-2 punches. In 93, Bledsoe, Rick Meyer, bust. Peyton Manning, Ryan Leaf in 1998, Leaf, bust. 99, Tim Couch, bust. Donovan McNabb was next. 2012, Luck, RG3. We'll give them a pass, I suppose, because Mike Shanahan ruined the knee of RG3. That rhymes. 2015, Jameis Winston, number 1 pick, flop, followed by Marcus Mariota. Both still in the league, but flop. And 2016, Jared Goff, whose backup was Case Keenum. I'm just going to have fun with the Case Keenum note from Pro Football Talk. 2016, Jared Goff 1, Carson Wentz, also double flop. And then finally, 2021, Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson, mega bust. So sorry to say, between Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, odds are one is going to be a washout. Luke, your reaction, please.
I just don't like to hear any slandering of the Jameis. That's all.
Why?
Jameis season. I don't know. It's just I just love him.
He had an
a lot of money.
opportunity. Then Derek Carr got paid. So I don't know what That's it. So okay.
That's all.
Is Evan Abrams, from a historical data perspective, I guess we'll call this sort of, it's not entirely trendy because it's not every year since he dates back to 1970, since the merger. This has more to do with performance as opposed to the actual betting of the draft.
I think it kind of just speaks to how valuable the quarterback position is in the league, that teams are going to take players that might not be worthy of a number 2 pick a lot higher than they should be, out of anything. It's very much, each draft is unique to its own. And I don't think I would never bet off trends. I would love a will 4 quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4 prop, yes or no, available, because it's never happened, which it never happening does not influence me whatsoever on whether it will happen.
James, this might be a good question for you, because once we get the results and say it is Stroud Young or Young Stroud, how do you crunch the numbers at Sports Info Solutions? How could you foresee this playing out? Does this kind of data factor in at all based on historical context?
I think you look back at some of those pairings that you read, and I'm thinking of Andrew Luck, who was the generational number 1, was supposed to go ahead of RG3 at all times. Trevor Lawrence was definitely supposed to go number 1, ahead of Zach Wilson and that group of quarterbacks there. And then I guess who wasn't a pairing, but another generational quarterback in Joe Burrow, who was the clear-cut number 1 quarterback that year. It feels like if there's not a generational consensus top 1 overall quarterback, and there's guys, you have these classes of quarterbacks at 4 or 5 deep sometimes. Mm-hmm. If there's ever toss-up, it seems like almost the best play is the quarterback that ends up almost towards the bottom of that list. Josh Allen ended up being the best. Well, him or Lamar Jackson. I guess it's Lamar Jackson who got bottom in the first round that year in 2018.
Right.
Justin Fields, Mac Jones. Well, sorry, that was the Trevor Lawrence draft. But those guys might end up better than Zach Wilson. So
that's a great point. And definitely like the expectation of a quarterback going in the late first almost feels like getting a quarterback in the late first is like a bargain with like the 5th-year option, where they aren't going to be held to the same expectations as someone going number 1 will ever be. That they might slip under the radar, but yeah, I totally agree with James.
And you're also going to a better team. Like the first overall pick is because you're terrible. So if you get a guy at the end of the first round, you usually had a playoff team anyway, and you're just plugging in that quarterback, and you're not there to save the franchise. You're just kind of the new plug and play guy.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Situationally, in Carolina, Miles Sanders, Adam Thielen, Hayden Hurst, quarterback-friendly coach, we think, in Frank Wright. Sets up well, I think, for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. And then you've got Houston, new head coach, both teams, new head coaches. You add Dalton Schultz, you do trade away Brandon Cooks, but there's some pieces, I think, in Houston, and they're in an easier division. I don't know. You add those things up. They're kind of horrible situations. Neither of those teams made the playoffs the previous year, but in a lot of cases where we see a team move up in the draft, the moving up thing normally doesn't work. And I'm talking now Carolina specifically. When you move up in the draft, historically, it doesn't always work. Now, Mahomes, it worked. Josh Allen, it worked. Lamar Jackson.
That's what we were saying last week. Like, if this is your guy, you either go get him or you have a top 5 pick. Like, if you're going to wait and hope he's there, unless I guess you're like a winning team, like I think the Ravens actually traded in the first for Lamar. Like, if he is your franchise QB, like, go get him. If you believe in this guy, which is like what I saw last week, which is my whole problem behind Mac. Like, the Pats just let him fall to him and let them get leapfrogged by the Bears for Justin Fields. It's just like the position, it's just too important to just hope he's there. Where if like they just take him because he felt like the Vikings are like a great example at 24 right now. Like, are they, which the Hendon Hooker is very hyped. Like, are they just going to wait and hope one of these quarterbacks is there, or are they going to trade up to like somewhere like in the teens and take Hendon Hooker, hoping which they're in a very tricky spot, and they're one of the more trendy Hendon Hooker quarterback teams. I've seen them trading up for Levis. I've seen it all.
Vikings are the favorite to land Hendon Hooker, by the way, at FanDuel plus 800. Okay, we'll move on. We have another note from Evan Abrams coming up, another nugget from our director of research coming up. We'll stay quarterback here. Luke, I want to get your reaction to the market movement on Anthony Richardson. And this has moved even more since I saw you put this out the other day. Anthony Richardson draft position under 4.5. So under pick 4.5. He's moved from minus 250 and it's now in that 160 range. You saw it go as low as minus 135. Where are we at with Anthony Richardson from a betting perspective?
Yeah, so this is this is a great example that you don't want to buy into the movement too much with it being such a sensitive market. But from my hypothesis of this really had to do with like the Bryce going number 1 rumor started to come out over the weekend. I thought, I'm surprised it took until Monday for it to get steamed, but in the under, I think it was 250 and then it came all the way down to 130 at one point. It's started creeping back up, but to me, it kind of had something to do with if Bryce goes 1, and it is true about the Texans passing on Stroud, the Cardinals might have an inkling to that where holding out for the trade makes a lot more sense if CJ Stroud is there, because the value of the number 3 pick is exponentially higher with CJ Stroud on the board compared to the implied value right now with Levis and Richardson, which if Stroud doesn't go 2 and he goes 3, it kind of pushes everyone back to the Richardson over, where there are rumors that the Colts love Levis too, where they might even take him over Richardson. So it definitely, like, you go from 2 outs where Richardson can go 3 or 4 to 1 with the uncertainty of if the Colts like Richardson or Levis more, which I think had to do with the over taking action. It is starting to come back up. Like, I think when it got to like the minus 130 range, like that was like clear value, because on my sheet out of the 40 mocks I track that I respect, the under hits at about like an 85% threshold. And the last 7, it's been hitting at 90. I don't have interest in it because there's too many variables that can really screw it up. And you have a really tight window that more chaos with only 4 picks to hit makes it a lot less interesting to me. But I don't want to buy too much into it yet, because the Cardinals trading is like the domino that affects everything.
Yeah. So that's I'm glad you brought that up, because that connects to the market as of now. Looking at FanDuel, Anthony Richardson to go number 3 overall at plus 100. And that reflects Adam Schefter's report on Monday. Adam Schefter, ESPN, at least 6 teams, which I did do 6 divided by 32 on my phone to get the exact percentage. That's about 19% of the league have asked the Arizona Cardinals about a trade up to 3. See, that's the math I bring to the show. These guys crunch other shit. Arizona is still mulling over it. Those 6 teams, 6 out of 32 interested in moving up. Well, 6 out of 31. Don't count the Cardinals. I want to go to James Weaver on this, though. And we're going to get to your other, we've got other thoughts, but we'll stay quarterback just to stay on point with this position because it's popular. And look, the first thing that pops up when you want to go bet on the draft is quarterback. And the quarterback names pop up when it comes to overall picks. Anthony Richardson, Sports Info Solutions, number 32 ranked prospect. 32. I had to hit read more to scroll down and find this guy where you had him. He might go number 3 in the draft. So I would imagine Sports Info Solutions is like, it's not a great idea. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, I certainly agree. He's an athletic freak, obviously, from his production in Florida, from his way he can run the football. He sets combine records. You look at pure accuracy metrics, dead last of all quarterback prospects in this draft in catchable throw percentage and dead last in on-target percentage. So by far the quarterback that struggles with accuracy the most. Now, some might say and point to, Josh Allen, we can fix up his accuracy. But again, that took him 3 years with arguably at the end of his case, Brian Daboll, who turns out to be one of the best offensive minds in football. So if based on sample size, we're looking at one guy that you can change and correct his accuracy over a history of everyone saying that, can't really fix that. That's really not something that can be fixed. Then where do you go from there?
And I think that ranking on Richardson is very much intuitive to what he is thought of, where you're not drafting him because he's a 35th ranked player. You're drafting him because he's there and you think he has the potential to be the number 1. Like, he's clearly not a top 10 player in this class based off of who he's been. You're drafting him for the ceiling that is number 1 ranking 3 or 4 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our scouts and the director of our scouting even said, like, those rankings are based on the total package of what a prospect is going into the draft. So if a player is more complete, he's going to have a higher grade from us and a higher scouting report from us than what some of these other prospects, i.e. like Richardson, would be. And
like, how much does like conference they played in, or like strength of opponent factor in, where like Richardson played in the SEC or like Tucker Kraft, that's one we're going to harp on. Like, he's high on your board, where like how much does like the conference and strength of opponents factor into those ratings?
Yeah. So those ratings specifically with the big board factor in a lot of our metrics as well. Not too many of those. Only a few of them are opponent dependent, depending on some of the more advanced stuff. But a lot of the grades come from our scouts who look into more the X's and O's and more their technique and things of that nature.
Makes sense.
So that's where a lot of those come from as well.
And looking at team to draft player, Anthony Richardson at FanDuel, Colts the favorite at plus 175, Tennessee, which if you missed that last episode, go check that out. Titans possibly moving up. We did a whole 10 minutes on it. Tennessee at plus 200, Vegas plus 550. There's Seattle at 12-1, Baltimore, Detroit, and so on.
And like, honestly, out of those, like a lot of those odds have trades implement like.
Well, that's what I'm asking.
Like,
would those six I just rattled off, would that reflect?
No,
Schefter?
like I think
some of them could.
If you were like, I think out of all of those, probably the best quote unquote value is probably Seattle.
I would agree.
I think Seattle should have better odds than the Raiders. They should have better odds than, I think you said. Like, I think Seattle should be top 3 in terms of
Indy,
odds,
Tennessee, Vegas, Seattle. That's the order.
Like, they should have better odds than Tennessee.
Okay.
Because like Tennessee, you need a trade. Like, I think like the rumors of Tennessee and Seattle, like there's nothing stronger between the two, where like everything I've heard about Seattle is it's Anderson or Richardson or Tyree, and then Tennessee, it's they're interested, quote unquote, in a quarterback and trading up, which trading up from 11, Tennessee's odds are very reflective of just a bunch of people betting into it.
Right. But as we
Not
discussed, we learned last year, about 13 months ago now, we learned what it required for San Francisco to move up to go get Trey Lance and the capital that was required.
possible.
Travis, am I missing? Now, I'm pointing out Richardson because of the odds reflect that he would be the favorite to go third based on what FanDuel currently presents in the market. From an Arizona trading the third pick perspective, and you can weave in Richardson here. What is your latest developing thought on the Cardinals? Of course, as Luke said, a lot of what we're going to find out on draft night relies on what they do with this.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it depends on what those first 2 picks are too. Because we mentioned if Houston does pass on a quarterback at 2, their pick at 3 becomes much more valuable than if it goes quarterback 1, 2. So I think they're going to wait. I think this might be a question that we don't get answered until, the night before the draft or even the draft itself. Because I think there's so many question marks at what's going to be available at 3. Is one of those top 2 quarterbacks going to be there? Will they not be? So if you don't know if you're trading up to get a Bryce Young or trading up to get a Levis, then I think if teams have those guys way different on their board, they're not going to make the same offer to get up to 3 if they don't know their guy's going to be there or not. So I think it's the domino, but I think it's going to be standing for a while.
There's the reporting, the latest there. We got the Cardinals. We've got the camp reports. I know Jalen Carter's going on another visit today. We'll get to him in a bit when we go to James Weaver from Sports Info Solutions. Big board. Luke kind of teased it. We got questions, so we'll get to that about his big board and how it reflects the betting market. Last piece of news. We'll go to Luke on this. Detroit, which was bolstering its secondary, and it has. But they make a move. They trade cornerback Jeff Okudah to the Atlanta Falcons. What does that do to your thought process on what the Lions might do with their draft pick right now sitting at 6?
Yeah, so that trade happened yesterday, and Schefter tweeted out, which was after, I don't know what was up with him. He was like retweeting a ton of stuff yesterday where I almost even put him on mute, and thankfully I didn't.
You don't want his sports Emmys updates?
Yeah, that was crazy. That whole Emmys thing. Like, relax.
He's just
Shefty.
supporting his coworkers. Like if you put out plays and you hit them, maybe I'll start just retweeting them just to bug you.
Yeah, dude, I support you.
Thank you.
But it happens, and I immediately, without even thinking twice, went and bet Lions to take a corner first position and Falcons to take a defensive line. Like, I didn't even think. I just went, and it ballooned up as you would expect it to. I think it was plus, I think it was plus money for both of them, and now it's minus 250, which I think.
So here, I'll give it to you right now. Atlanta Falcons.
Go ahead.
Atlanta Falcons, first drafted player, defensive lineman, minus 250. And the Detroit Lions, first player drafted, cornerback, minus 270.
Yeah, neither of them should be that high at this point. It's just there was a rush of betting into that market, and it reflects it. Where Falcons wise, corner was like both of these teams. It was corner, D-line were the 2 positions that were favored. Where this trade definitely, I don't want to say eliminates, but creates a lot more momentum for the other. Where Falcons were corner, D-line, and now D-line should probably be the favorite. Which it's definitely based off of Tyree falling to them, or maybe them taking a guy like Lucas Van Ness is a very hot guy that you're hearing that are involved with the Falcons, and I'm also seeing Nolan. But to me, this also increases the chances of like the Bijan vibes, where I have seen a lot of people that I respect landing Bijan at 8 to the Falcons, which definitely increases the possibility. And then with the Lions, you have Witherspoon somewhat becoming very likely. Where I think the number 6 pick, he's like definitely the favorite. Witherspoon is pretty much leapfrogged Gonzalez as the favorite to be the first corner. But the other, like, I want to say the outlying ripple effect to this is Jalen Carter, where it seems like
visiting with the Raiders today.
Yeah, where it seems like he has a narrative for every pick at this point. Like if we're just eliminating picks 1 through 4, these were the landing spots where it's over under 7.5. And Seattle, from experts like Rob Statton, no shot. And then you have the Lions, who just traded their corners, so they're probably going to be leaning corner in the draft. So Jalen's out there. And then you have the Raiders, who there were reports that I don't totally buy that they took him off their board. I don't know why you would bring someone in if they're completely off your board, like Jalen Carter's in Las Vegas right now. But the spots for Jalen to land based off of the narratives that we had are getting smaller and smaller. And that's where the trend of Jalen falling to the Eagles or the Bears is taking money. There's too much uncertainty behind Jalen for me to get involved, like where the Cardinals could trade back into from 7 to 11, let's just say. And a couple months ago, Jalen was the chalk to the Cardinals. And the Raiders are a trendy pick for the Raiders. The Cardinals could trade, which would make the under. There's just so many scenarios where who knows, the Eagles could leapfrog the Bears because they want Jalen. But that trade kind of pushes Jalen back, but also creates a certainty on the 2 positions where Witherspoon is going to be to the Lions in every single mock that you read. And then it's probably going to be either Tyree, Van Ness, or Bijan to the Falcons at 8 in terms of the mocks that you're reading.
First cornerback drafted, market, Devin Witherspoon. We reacted live to his combine on the last pod, and he ran well. Luke was excited about that for him and what it could mean in terms of going to bet it. It's at -175. James, I'll go back to you again. James Weaver, Sports Info Solutions. He's joining us. His big board is at nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. On your big board, ranked number 7 overall, Devin Witherspoon, the top-ranked corner. Christian Gonzalez right behind. We'll use this as a jumping-off point to dive into the big board. Luke and Travis have questions, comments, and concerns. We'll weave all those in, but we'll just use this as okay. There you go. So concerns is the highlight of the 3. But just talking corner here in reaction to this deal. And look, as I said, the Lions did make some moves. They added Cam Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley. They get CJ Gardner-Johnson in their back end as well. From a betting perspective, if you see Witherspoon at -175, I would imagine that would correlate well with your number 7 ranking overall.
Yeah, we have Witherspoon as the best corner in this draft. He's really good in press man coverage skills, good ball skills, and he plays physical to the line of scrimmage. He's top 2 in every metric on our leaderboard, whether it be yards per target allowed, things like that nature. One thing he can improve on a little bit is in open field tackling. Sometimes you got defenders that break off of his tackling skills, but yeah, overall, the Witherspoon Gonzalez 1-2 is pretty consensus, and it's what we got at SIS as well.
He's just so aggressive. I feel like his over aggressiveness is somewhat of the fault to his lack of tackling efficiency.
And Witherspoon, I would say this is an overarching question for your big board and your rankings over at SIS, but this would be an example of a player not being overranked when you make a comparison to a media ranking, to a Zerline, or to just using him as an example. No,
yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely some guys up there that, that correlate in line to what the mock drafts are. And like I said prior, it's just based on kind of a lot of that complete aspect of what a prospect looks like rather than what could be down the road. To see what happens in our big board rankings.
Okay.
And when you're going, so with a big board, so how much would you say, because I know you said that you have scouts that are putting grades on them. How much is it, how much is this big board opinion versus just straight math?
Yeah, I would probably say it's about 60-40 in terms of the grading from the scouts. And then the math and metrics and everything back that up with the 40%.
Cool.
Our scouts do a really good job of breaking down film and really looking into these players and diving into what their positives and negatives are, pros and cons, what they're solid at, what they can improve upon, and a lot of their back end stuff as well. So they do a good job with doing a lot of that grading itself. And then, yeah, we have on our site as well, we have our leaderboard metrics with a whole host of different metrics from what comparing to other players at the certain position, what they had done in their final year of collegiate ball. So
do you have any guys that you have like planted your flag on that you just love no matter where they are ranked? Like for me, like I love Emmanuel Forbes. That's my personal opinion. Do you have any like plant your flag guys that you think you might be higher on than everyone else that is like a sleeper that is going to be great in your opinion?
I honestly don't have to like a plant my flag guy. A guy that kind of interests me though, a little bit further down the board, is Brian Brzee from Clemson. He was a physical freak coming into Clemson and had a really good productive freshman year. And then kind of some injuries in 2021, and then had some more injuries in 2022 along with some personal issues, kind of derailed his last 2 seasons. But even then, he's got the physical tools to be a really solid defensive lineman in this league. And I'm interested to see if he can pull that all together, if he can get to the right fit. Seeing him in like kind of the 2nd to 3rd round tier, and if a team can get him back there and kind of develop what he has, I think that'd be a really solid get for them.
Yeah, he was The Athletic does like a freak piece before every college football season, like the biggest freaks going into this, like athletically going into the season. Like number 1 was Mozzie Smith, and then he was number 2, Brzee. So it definitely aligns.
Yeah, that upside's definitely there. Again, the production's the question with some of his injuries and things of that nature, but can certainly make an impact.
Love it.
All right, let's dive into the nitty-gritty of the big board. We got a couple more nuggets from Evan Abrams we can share before we wrap up. We're going to spend some time on this now. So again, James Weaver, Sports Info Solutions, very tight, nifty product. If you go onto a desktop and you can go teams in terms of NFL teams, you can look at position groups, and over at Sports Info Solutions, they've got write-ups, scouting write-ups, metrics, leaderboards on every player. So we're going to talk position groups, and as a jumping off point, and we're trying to use this, James, to figure out how we can take your big board, for example, and then line it up with the betting market and see where we could find some potential value.
And can I just dive into like why you want to look at big boards when you're like betting the draft real quick? Because it is important, because I don't think people realize, or some, because it's very valuable. Where, especially this year, where there is like a lot of uncertainty, there is a media perception that becomes a group think. And for me, I take like Jeremiah, McShay, and Brugler, and I just create an aggregate, and I compare that to the athletic consensus, which is somewhat of like the media's perception to me. And you compare it, where a guy like Paris Johnson, based off of those 3, which are probably the closest thing we have to what a team might be thinking, is ranked 18. And then if you look at the athletic consensus, which is what I can assume that might be like the media's perception, they have him at 8. So there's a difference between those 2, where the mock drafts are propping Paris Johnson into the top 10. But like based off of the big boards that you respect, he might be ranked a lot lower than what the mock drafts are telling us, and he might fall, as long as like the position isn't creating like an Anthony Richardson where he's in the 30s, like in a SIS, but his position is just going to make it inevitable for him to go earlier than he should. It's very important.
Okay. Thank you, Luke. And I'm not being sarcastic. That's a good note. Like the big board versus mock draft, big difference. So as a jumping off point, let's discuss the tight end market. Tucker Kraft is ranked by Sports Info Solutions as the number 3 tight end, but more importantly, the 25th overall ranked prospect. He's only behind Mayer and Washington, 13 and 21 respectively in your rankings. Tucker Kraft is 100-1 to be the first tight end selected in the draft. He is ranked 6th on FanDuel's odds listings. That's insane. That's crazy based on where you have him and where the betting markets have him. He's ranked higher overall now, ranked higher than Anthony Richardson, who we've discussed, Jordan Battle, Osiris Torrance. We'll go to James first, and then we'll let Luke and Travis, throw stuff at you or something virtually. What makes SIS so high on Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, so Also, to add into that, Tucker Kraft is at the same grading level of both Michael Mayer and Darnell Washington on our end, in terms of what his overall composite grade was.
Okay.
And the reason behind that is he's got the skills that correlate to a complete tight end, whether it be catching a football, being a security blanket, finding the open holes in the zone, as well as being a nasty physical run blocker. He's coming from South Dakota State, so obviously, you talk about the potential issue of coming from lesser competition. But one of the reasons why he's rated so high is because of his run blocking skills. He's been able to put guys in the ground. He's a relentless effort guy. Play in, play out. When he's called upon to make his blocks, he finishes off. One of the reasons why he's kind of, with the market is what it is he's coming off a couple seasons with some injury concerns. This past season, he had missed 6 games with a high ankle sprain where he had some torn ligaments. So he had to get surgery on that, which was kind of an issue. And in 2021, he missed a few games as well with an injury. But yeah, he can be a solid Y and an H tight end. And in comparing him to like someone like Dalton Kincaid, who is, I believe, the highest or the favorite to be the first tight end selected. Kincaid's definitely more of that pass catching role where he has some tools he needs to work on in terms of being a better run blocker. But in terms of our big board and just being that overall complete package, that's where kind of Tucker Kraft falls into the grading that he did.
Travis, did you brush up on your Jackrabbits depth chart before today's show? This is your test.
I did, yeah. Because when I looked at the tight ends, I thought I knew like Sam Laporta. I thought that was as deep of a cut as we'd need to go. So I had not heard of Tucker Kraft when I saw your big board. So I had to go in and do some research. I think what you said makes a lot of sense. I was actually more surprised at Kincaid being 4th on your list. Like you said, considering he's the betting favorite, rather than, him being at 3rd. I do love your Darnell Washington ranking because he's been a favorite of mine. He seems like, we mentioned physical freaks, and he's just a monster that just breaks all the charts. So I do like him having 2nd ranking there in that. So it does make sense the way you're projecting these players, where you're combining their run blocking and their pass catching ability, where some teams might not care about the run blocking and how they use their tight end. So they'll have them higher on their board than, vice versa. So the way you're ranking them, I think, makes more sense now. But I can see how a team might say, I don't care if that guy ever blocks for a run in his life, as long as he runs out there and catch the ball. That's what we need in our offense. So that's why he might go a little bit higher.
Brendan, I will give you one guess, and I am not betting Tucker Kraft to be the first tight end taken. But if there is a chance, there's one place that he could go that I don't think anyone would be shocked, even though it is crazy.
What, New England? Because he has the same last name as the owner?
Oh, I didn't even connect those dots.
Oh.
But at 14, that would be the first tight end taken. And we have seen way crazier things. I'm thinking about it more. The Patriots taking Tucker Kraft at number 14.
Maybe he will bet it now, everybody.
I'll only share that ticket after it wins. But yeah, and all of that makes sense. It seems like he's very similar to like the Mayer vibe in terms of like the type of tight end he is. There was a Jackrabbit drafted recently. I forget who he was.
The running back, Pierre. Patriots took him.
Pierre Strong.
God. Again, another connection. Jesus, yeah.
Dude, I'm looking at South Dakota State's roster. They've got like 18 tight ends on their roster. They're all young guys too. Nate Sullivan, David Alpers, Zach Hines, Grayton Gannon. Like, this might be the start of the Jackrabbit pipeline.
We lost, what's his name, to the Falcons, that tight end from the Titans. I worst deal ever. I forget his name. Got a 2 tight end offense with a owner with the last same name and a coach GM that has drafted from them there recently. 100-1.
You've talked yourself into it in the last minute. Yep.
We're at the point where like I almost have to, because if it does happen, like I'll be the guy caught not holding the bag. But
we do have a tight end from South Dakota State is already one of the top 5-ish, arguably, tight ends in the league right now in Dallas Goedert.
That's right.
Oh,
yeah.
shit. Yep.
Yeah,
They're gonna bet it. Here it comes. Luke and Travis, what else you got for James as far as looking around? So Jackson Smith and Jigba is an example. Luke, this would actually favor you because James and company over at SIS have him as their number 9 ranked overall prospect, which would suit the under. I think you took an under in terms of draft position, correct? Luke Swain, remember correctly?
I actually took the over.
Oh shit! All right,
it's okay.
Well,
Yeah, I put out Jackson over 11.5 minus 115 last week, which it's not available anymore. It's 12.5 minus 190, but that was just a bad number that the books set, like a really bad number, which gives me hope that they're still bad at this. Yeah, I mean, it's not even worth talking because it's not available, which if the juice was lower, I would still have interest in JSN over. I still think he's going to be the first wide receiver taken, but I just don't think it's going to be that early.
You guys got anything else for James as far as?
Yeah, I had one guy.
Okay, please do.
1 second. I just had him. My other question is, like, when these rankings get spit out, like when you're seeing them and you're comparing them to, let's say, like a Jeremiah ranking or someone that generally we respect, like Kraft being that low, let's just say, like, have you ever like tinkered them or you're like, this is just too crazy, or you just ride out and trust the process 100%?
Yeah, to my knowledge, we write out the process. I know, like, I'm not too hands-on with a lot of these are coming from our ops and scouting department, but from what they view and what they see as what's good and what's bad, they definitely write out what their process is and they stick to it.
Yeah, you have to do it that way. Cool. And then
Another
Gibbs.
guy I wanted to
ahead,
bring
James.
up,
Please.
John Michael Schmitz at 14 overall. He's a center from Minnesota. Now, there's not a huge first center off the board market that I know of that's out there, but he was a name that he has expected draft position for me of around 40. Is that just a issue of positional value where the league's not valuing center that highly, but overall you think he's just going to be a really good value in maybe like the second round or something like that?
Yeah, definitely. From looking at him, he seems to be he looks to be the complete prospect at center, both with his physical traits and with his size and his intelligence as well. Being the center position and knowing what to do and knowing the different blocking schemes of that nature. He seems to be certainly well packaged as being the best center in the draft.
And then the last one, and I think this is a like edge defensive line. That's definitely like the trendy pick for like the most volatile range towards the end of the first, which there are a couple of guys that are trending where for me, like, I think the guy everyone's sleeping on in the mocks is like Keon White, which I see he's ranked, I think 5th in terms of like your edge rushers, which I absolutely love to see at 29. So he's in the first round. But I am like Will McDonald's at the other guy. That's probably the most popular, like contrarian mock in the end of the first, but another one, and I'm going to try, but Felix and Aduke Ozamoa is the other that was
like
trending.
Uzama, the tight end.
No, he's an edge. Well, yeah, I guess.
Chuck,
he's not even rated. He's not even rated. Which, like, at what point are like players just not rated? Is it like top 50? And then 151 is an NA.
I think it's the top. Is it the top 100? That's actually something
100. Yeah,
I should know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like 101, they're just not rated, or is it when we get to like if they were close enough, would you guys have put out 150 guys?
Yeah. I think once they get to a certain threshold, it's kind of from there the overall ranking goes away. But yeah.
And then the one guy who. Byron Young out of Tennessee. Do you have anything on him? I see him a little bit higher.
Byron Young.
I'm putting you on the spot. It's okay. That's like a no-namer that really doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
But the edge rushers are so tight at the end, which is very reflective to what we're seeing in the mocks for Keon McDonald and BJ Ojulari.
Ojulari, yeah.
Yeah, which BJ Ojulari is a guy that's seems like he's picking up momentum, which I just love to see Keon White at 29 because I love that guy. He's like, he is an Eagles vibe. And then McDonald kind of has a Saints vibe because they always take like these lengthy guys that are just projects. But yeah, it's pretty much all I had. I don't even know what I just said, but
The vibes. And again, folks, you
Vibes.
can go to nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com. You can filter however you'd like, and you can go to positions, edge rusher, for example, or just get the entire full top 100 as far as all positions go.
it
All
is
right,
one of the most beautiful platforms I've seen too. It's so
it's
visually
very,
appealing.
very tight product. It's very good.
Looks expensive, which I like to say. Premium. It has a premium feel. That's a compliment.
I got two more nuggets from our friend Evan Abrams, and then I want to find out what we're going to bet today on the draft, if anything at all, before we go. So we talked about one of the nuggets as it pertains to quarterbacks going 1 and 2 in the draft. So here's another nugget for you. Buckeyes in the top 5. Only one player was invited to the 1974 NFL draft. You probably never heard of him. It was John Hicks, R.I.P. John Hicks, the only offensive lineman to ever finish runner-up for the Heisman, and he was a bust. Since the 1970 NFL merger, he is one of only 5 Ohio State offensive players to go. Top 5 in the draft. Here are the other 4. In 78, Chris Ward, bust. 82, Art Schleister, bust. 97, Orlando Pace, good pick. Arguably the best tackle in NFL history. 2016, Zeke Elliott, who enjoyed 4 good seasons, and then he got fat. But he can still jump inside the, what do you call it? The, oh my gosh, the charity.
Salvation Army.
Salvation Army. Thank you. In the Salvation Army belt. He can do that too. And then, so there are your 4. So Zeke, the most recent in 2016. So if CJ Stroud goes top 5, history is not on his side. So maybe he should slip to 7 to Vegas, Luke. For his
Maybe.
I'd still prefer money wise if he goes number 1. Thanks.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
All
Great.
right. Well, pray for CJ Stroud. Luke and Travis are just.
And while we've been on the air, Levis number 2 odds have gotten smoked, which kind of is piggybacking off of what we discussed earlier. But
11 to 1 now.
Yeah, and he was 25 to 1 10 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago. And we don't, this is a highly sensitive market. Like a couple of people could have come in and bet $50, $100 on Levis 25 to 1, and they would have moved it. So I'm only mentioning that because just because his odds have just got cut in half doesn't mean that all of a sudden he's a lock to go to. We're going to be like, you should be putting him number 2 at like in a mock. I'm not, if I'm making a mock, I'm not putting him 2. I'd be lying if I didn't have a light mist on Levis number 2, but that's more of like a bet because I don't believe it, but I don't want to be the only guy not holding the bag if it does happen.
Well, and CJ Stroud to go 3rd overall, that's been cut in 2/3. It's down to plus 600. That was 25 to 1. I'm pretty sure when we were here.
I mean, I'm currently in a situation that like anything other than Rice Stroud chalk works for me.
Okay. And the final nugget from our friend Evan, QB size matters. We've heard this quite a bit about Bryce Young. Might overall be the top consensus prospect in this draft at that position. But yeah, he's 5'10". Drafting him could be a gigantic risk. And guys, I could not believe this stat when Evan shared it. Since 2000, only 4 total quarterbacks have made an active roster at 5'10" or shorter. So only 4 made a roster. 2 were drafted. Here's the list. Joe Hamilton, 2000 7th rounder. Woody Dantzler, undrafted 02. Quentin Flowers, undrafted 2018. And the top pick of the 2019 draft, currently studying, not playing video games, we hope, Kyler Murray. Plus, if you throw in Stetson Bennett, which there is a market for Stetson Bennett, draft position, 6th round is the favorite at plus 250. This is the first time in 20 years 2 quarterbacks under 6 feet are even listed on the draft board. You have to go back to 2003. Seneca Wallace and Brad Banks. Size matters, guys. Has that narrative lost some steam the Bryce being, I mean, clearly it hasn't if he's the favorite now to go number one in the draft. But are we worried about size mattering, Luke? I guess you would be on the side of it. Yes, it matters. Take CJ Stroud number one, please.
This kind of just comes into like, I think like the number one principle when betting into the draft, that like your personal opinion on the matter should not matter. Where like my perception of that narrative, it's definitely like now that the combine's behind us, which it was definitely at like peak attention in terms of his size. I don't think it's not really, if anything, the only thing that you're seeing on his size mattering is someone like Chris Sims or someone like putting out content to defend it not mattering. I think there was something on, I think Peyton Manning and Eli have something on ESPN now where they did like 20 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever show on how he's fine with his current size. But yeah, I'm not, it definitely has lost momentum in terms of mattering, which goes hand in hand in him being the number one pick favorite at the moment.
I think it matters less in today's NFL as well, just because they're protecting the quarterbacks so much more than they used to. I mean, if this was like the 90s, I don't think you could touch him because he would just get destroyed.
Yeah, it's his weight. It's not his height. Like his weight is the problem, not his height.
Yeah, when he gets landed on by like a 350-pound dude, that's going to hurt. But now that's a personal foul where you can't land on him. So I think, taking some of that away, it would give a team more confidence that this guy can make it through a season.
We gave out a ton of bets on the last episode. Any bets, Luke, Travis, that we would like to recommend or are taking right now that we'd like to take and give out now?
I don't have anything that I wanted this show ready to give out. I definitely will next week. One that like has caught my attention was Vikings positional odds wide receiver. It's nothing too fun. It's plus 200, but I don't want to say that the Ravens are out on wide receiver because I don't think Odell solves their problem. But they had like overall, they have made some moves at wide receiver to make their wide receiver core like very fair, which the Ravens were one of the hurdles for a wide receiver to get to the Vikings, which a lot of the mocks that you see, the wide receivers that would be fits at 24 or Vikings 23.
23, Addison.
Yeah. The Ravens had like mocks have the Ravens like scooping the last one, and all of a sudden wide receivers aren't on the board, where if Odell and the other moves that they've made has created the Ravens odds to, I think corners the heavy favorite now, where one of the wide receivers could get to the Vikings. And for me, and this is like my galaxy brain perspective, I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but like Thielen leaving the Vikings is like a scenario where if you remember the Falcons years ago, if Roddy White is Thielen, who Roddy White left, and then the Falcons drafted Calvin Ridley, who Calvin Ridley's popular comp is Addison. So if Roddy White is Thielen leaving and Jordan Addison is Calvin Ridley, who the Falcons drafted to be the number 2 to Julio, which Addison could be that number 2 to Justin Jefferson after someone left, which that is Addison's sweet spot. If I'm making a mock, I put Addison there every single time. Which wide receiver at 2-1, I think is fair. It's not sexy. It's not fun. But a lot of these positional props have kind of gotten drained. But if there are moves like trades, like don't think, just jump. Because the obvious answer to these positions, like the Lions yesterday, is worth it because plus 150 is now minus 250, which happened in about minutes.
Another thought for James before we wrap, brought up receivers there and that looking at the big board you've got mapped out. One that jumped out to me too was Josh Downs of UNC. Most mocks, when you weigh them all out and find a mean second rounder, mid-second round pick, you guys got him ranked ahead of Jordan Addison. So just looking at your big board, Smith and Jigba, Johnston, Flowers, then there's Downs, and then Jordan Addison. You have a thought on Josh Downs as a guy that could surprise maybe end of the first, early second?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to go a little contrarian to the big board here on a matter that something that some of our guys wrote. One of my colleagues wrote an article about, and that's the converting the college route tree to the NFL route tree and kind of projecting production based on that aspect. Players that are usually drafted or receivers usually drafted in the first 3 rounds who are asked to do more and run more unique routes in college actually show less of a performance in the NFL in their first few seasons. So Josh Downs and Zay Flowers both rank at the top of a unique route standpoint of what they were asked to do in college. And then comparing that to, higher. So, and then, sorry, what was that? Oh, no, yeah, okay. And
I
was
predicting who you were going to bring up, so I totally cut you off. Apologies.
No, you're good. And then what does show success is running the exact NFL, like close to what is the NFL route tree. And Josh Downs and Zay Flowers both rank at the bottom of that list.
Interesting.
So it's kind of interesting to think about maybe Downs and Flowers not being ready to go right out of college. That's a super in-depth piece that we did and found some other stuff. Downs did rank high in a lot of production metrics. But some of his other stuff he was 30th in targets above expectation, as well as 15th in target share. And then Zay Flowers is also, he was the one-man band at Boston College. So he did have some drop issues as well. He was tied for 10th in catchable percentage. But yeah, those are 2 guys you might see at the end of the first, beginning of the second. But overall, this wide receiver market, I think it's wide open. I think that's really depending on what kind of a fit you need as a receiver. A guy like Quentin Johnson, if you want a guy that can fly down the field and go get a ball above a receiver, and you'd rather have that over a slot guy, which can come as a dime a dozen later in the draft. He can certainly fly up boards as well. I just think a lot of these receivers have their flaws, and whoever can, it's just going to be more of a fit aspect to see which one of them goes first.
For sure.
Travis, any bets you recommend giving out now?
Yeah, we talked about the tight end market earlier. Mayer was the favorite for a long time, and now Kincaid has flipped him. But really, with most of the mocks that I'm seeing, it's still pretty much 50-50 there. But now you can get Mayer at plus 150 at first tight end. I think if you haven't got into that market, I think that's a good place to start. There really hasn't been any news that I've seen for Kincaid leaping over Mayer. And, with James here, they have him number 1 on their big board. I see him number 1 on a lot. So I think at plus 150 there, he's a good bet for first tight end off the board.
To clarify, we are not giving out Tucker Kraft at 101 to be the first tight end off the board, unless,
But we're not going to shame you if you do want to bet it either. So
James Weaver, Sports Info Solutions, thanks so much for stopping by. Your perspective was excellent. I thought you gave us some really good information, and look forward to more of your coverage as the draft nears.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. It was definitely a blast, and looking forward to cover the rest of it up until the draft time.
Travis Reed, Luke Swain, myself, Brendan Glasheen will be back next week as well as the week after, 2 weeks away from the draft. We come out with these episodes on Wednesdays. So we've got 2 weeks to go before the draft. So 2 more episodes before the first round, 2 weeks from tomorrow. As a reminder, here on the Action Network podcast, the NBA playoffs have arrived. So you can check out Action's NBA betting podcast Buckets. You can also check out episodes every weekday throughout the NBA playoffs. So it's a every weekday thing with Buckets as it pertains to the NBA playoffs. We have our UFC betting preview coming as well on the pod at the end of the week. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. The Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. Thanks for tuning into this latest NFL draft betting update. Myself, Luke, and Travis will talk to you again next week.